today, I want to give a brief presentation of what I think is on my mind these days. And I don't know if last time, whether people really liked the talk on tracking recovery, on resting heart rate variability, and sleep. So as you know that our goal and focus is on improving health through intermittent fasting, through a diet that is low in refined and processed carbs, through exercise or optimal exercise. And today I'm going to shift the focus and actually start out with a question. So in order to start out with a question, I'm going to first share my screen. So what if I told you guys that there is an activity that can improve your blood sugar? Out here is shown a red blood cell that is coated with blood sugar. The higher the coating of your red blood cells, the greater your hemoglobin A1C is. A red blood cell lives for 3 months. So if your A1C is high, your average blood sugar is high. And this activity can reduce your blood sugar. It can make your insulin work better. It can make the insulin receptor on which the insulin sits and makes the insulin action of driving sugars in and other actions of insulin work much better. What if this activity reduces your appetite or improves your satiety by improving the hormone called leptin? What if this activity reduces your hunger hormone called ghrelin? Now, in our brain is a center called the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is right in here. And it's responsible for the good part of our brain that gives us planning, reasoning, and thinking. And today I was trying to make this presentation and I was a little stressed because I was behind time. And if my prefrontal cortex is not working well, then I will give in to temptations of eating a cookie or a nice dessert, a sweet that is in front of me, even if it is not good for me. So what if this activity makes the prefrontal cortex and your reasoning and your decision making better? And what if this activity reduces the activity of your limbic brain, which is sort of a stress response in which people give in to temptations? What if this activity reduces your flight or fight hormone, which is called the adrenaline or epinephrine? And what if this activity reduces your resting heart rate? What if this improves your heart rate variability? Higher the heart rate variability means that your heart is more calm. It's not sympathetically aroused. It has got a higher vagal influence. What if this activity reduces your blood pressure? What if this activity improves your immunity? In other words, this is a coronavirus and it can cause a common cold, and it reduces your, or it improves your body's ability to prevent an infection. What if this activity improves a certain cell in your body called the natural killer cell? You would be surprised that you, Melissa, me, everybody in this audience has some cancer cells. And these cancer cells are being constantly eliminated by certain immune cells in the body. And what if this activity improves the killing of the cancer cells through the natural killer T cells? What if this activity, when you get vaccinated, it improves your antibody response to that vaccine? What that really means is that, let's say I get vaccinated with either the Moderna vaccine, or with the Pfizer vaccine. my response in creating antibodies and immunologic cells that fight that infection, if it were to happen to me, is that response robust or not very robust? And this activity dictates that. Many of you have heard about aging. Aging means that you're getting older and people age at different rates. And one of the factors of aging is the ability of our cells to regenerate, to multiply and be born anew. And aging is found in our chromosomes. This is the DNA material that we have. This is the blueprint through which cells replicate themselves. And the chromosomes have something called a telomere. If the telomere becomes smaller and smaller, it's a sign of aging. What if this activity reduces the telomere shortening and reduces our aging process? So I guess by this time you guys have already thought what this activity is. And it would not come as a surprise to you, but perhaps it will, because you thought that I was only talking about sleep. And that is the focus of my presentation. But all of these are the 4 pillars of health, not just fasting, not just a low-carb diet, but exercise that is guided by recovery. So let me see if I can convince you today that sleep has been tested very effectively. And I don't know why we have not looked into sleep as a 4th pillar, as an organization like the fasting method and as IDM. We not only should focus on improving your health through all the usual techniques that we talk about, but if we fail to talk about sleep, a substantial proportion of you will not benefit. So in this elegant study, Japanese study, they had a recorder that monitored blood pressure, monitored heart rate variability. And this was done in young men. And these young men were deprived of sleep. So what happened? So a group of young men got 3.6 hours of sleep. The same group then was given 8 hours of sleep. This is their systolic blood pressure. When they got less sleep, 3.6 hours, the blood pressure was immediately elevated. So you can see that the blood pressure is higher out here compared to the blood pressure when they got 8 hours of sleep. This is the diastolic blood pressure. The diastolic blood pressure remained high at night and also during the day, depending on whether they got 3.6 hours versus 8 hours. This is every individual that was in that study. The white circle means that this was a day in which they got normal sleep. The dark circle means this was a day in which sleep was insufficient, only 3.6 hours. And you can see that when sleep was insufficient compared to their baseline, their blood pressure was higher. This is systolic blood pressure. Now, in last presentation, we talked about heart rate variability. Now, in order for the people who did not attend the last seminar to tell you what heart rate variability is that heart rate variability is the balance between your sympathetic system, which is creating a stress response, and your parasympathetic or vagal system, which is creating a calming response. If you have a high sympathetic system, heart rate variability is poor. If you have a balance between the vagal and the sympathetic system, heart rate variability is good. Now, these people had a different measure of heart rate variability. This is called a frequency measure. And in here, a low ratio, that means a line that is lower is better. So it would come as no surprise to you that when it was 3.6 hours, the heart rate variability was worse. In other words, the ratio was higher. In the group that got 8 hours of sleep, the heart rate variability was better. So this is being done in young men only with a sleep deprivation of a day. Now, many young men would be surprised that one of the best ways to get older is to get sleep restriction. One of the effects of sleep restriction is that it reduces your testosterone levels. So 1 week of sleep restriction in this young man was done. Instead of getting almost 9 hours of sleep, they got about a little less than 5 hours of sleep for 1 week. There was about a 10 to 15% reduction in their testosterone levels just by 1 week of sleep restriction. In the words of one of the most prominent scholars on sleep, or why we sleep, that is Matthew Walker, these men are behaving as if they are about 10 to 15 years older in terms of their testosterone production. So one good way to lose your virility would be to not sleep well, because you will reduce your testosterone production, which will reduce your muscle mass, which will reduce your virility, your strength, and your well-being. Now, this is from a scientist called Eve Van Cotter. She's done a number of work, and this work is very illustrative. Took 12 healthy men and for only 2 nights restricted their sleep to 4 hours and compared them to 10 hours. So she wanted to see a few things. One is that if I restricted their sleep, would the satiety hormone, which is called leptin. Leptin is a hormone that's evaluated by our fat cells. It goes and tells the brain there is enough fuel around. It creates a sense of satiety. It prevents you from overeating. So a lower leptin level will make you eat more. So what happened with sleep restriction? You can see after 4 hours a day for only 2 days, the leptin levels were dramatically lower compared to the group that was sleeping for 10 hours. Now, our body also elaborates a hormone called ghrelin. The sight of food will make ghrelin get released. And ghrelin causes a sense of hunger. It causes stomach contraction. It makes you want to eat and overeat. So what happened to the levels of ghrelin in these individuals? Sleep restriction increased the ghrelin level compared to people who were sleeping for 10 hours. When these individuals rated their hunger, the people who were sleep deprived rated their hunger much higher than the people who had sleep sufficiency. Their appetite was greater. Now, she did another thing. She showed these people cookies and cakes and carb-rich food, like out here is sweets, starchy food, fruit juices. And you can find that with 10 hours of sleep compared to 4 hours of sleep, there was a craving, a significant craving for these refined food that were rich in carbs and rich in both carbs and fat together, something that perhaps is not good for people who are obese and overweight. Now I'm going to touch on a couple of things, 3 things. One is alcohol. The second is sleeping pills. And third would be to some degree caffeine. I have not made good slides on caffeine. I apologize for that. I'll go into them in more detail at a different time. But let's take alcohol. Many people drink alcohol and they think that they sleep better. But alcohol is really a toxin. Once alcohol is ingested, the primary purpose of the liver is to detoxify that toxin. But here we are focusing on what alcohol does to sleep. Alcohol leads to sleep fragmentation. That means that you don't sleep well, you wake up a lot. One of the things that alcohol does is that it reduces your rapid eye movement sleep or your dream sleep. So our sleep is composed of non-REM, that is non-rapid eye movement sleep. It comes through stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then it is followed usually by a rapid eye movement sleep. The 3 and 4 are considered to be deep sleep. These are sleep that restores your body. It helps with transferring your memory from short-term to long-term memory. The deep sleep makes you release the hormone that helps you become healthier, called the growth hormone. The deep sleep reduces your heart rate. The deep sleep lowers your blood pressure. The deep sleep reduces your fight or flight hormone called adrenaline. The deep sleep lowers your serum cortisol levels. Alcohol has a predominant impact on the dream sleep. In addition, there are frequent wake or awake periods. In fact, the rapid eye movement sleep goes back so bad that if somebody were to overindulge in alcohol, that is, people who get intoxicated on a regular basis, they get alcohol withdrawal. And alcohol withdrawal is manifested by them having daytime dreams. While they're awake, they're having dreams. These are called hallucinations, psychosis. The collective term for that is delirium tremens, as I have pointed out here. So you would ask me, what is the relevance of rapid eye movement sleep? Now, I'm no sleep expert, but the sleep research says that rapid eye movement sleep is important for higher cognitive functions. The non-rapid eye movement sleep transfers the short-term memory that is housed in a part of a brain called hippocampus into the cortex. So in other words, the non-REM or deep sleep is associated with transferring the memory and writing it in permanent ink as a protein of sort in your cortex, in your higher brain, so that it can be recalled. But having a piece of memory, but not being able to do the cognitive thinking and the association around it would not help us. What helps us is to tie these memories with other experiences so that as humans, we are capable of abstract thinking, of insight, of complex problem solving. So many researchers think that the REM sleep or the rapid eye movement sleep is responsible for those kinds of functioning. So there was a researcher, and we have already gone through this. Alcohol-related sleep alteration results in increase of your adrenaline or the fight or flight response. It increases your resting heart rate. It reduces your heart rate variability. It increases the risks of atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation is a very common arrhythmia, and I'm sure there'll be many questions on that. One of the selling points of the iWatch is that it can record your EKG and tell you whether you're getting an episode of atrial fibrillation. And alcohol-related sleep alteration is highly responsible for causing high blood pressure. So what was done here was that a study was done, and I wish I had put a little pointers out here. This study, and I'll give you a link to this, a group of researchers took college students, and they gave them a cognitive task to learn that involved association. They had to use certain new grammar to create certain words based on association and cognitive skills. So there were three groups of people. All three were taught the same problem-solving skills. And one group, after they learned the problem-solving skill, had alcohol on the day of learning. A second group did not have alcohol that day, but they had alcohol 2 days later at night before they slept. And the third group, control group, got no alcohol. And these people were tested 7 days later. And what happened is that right after testing, the percentage of correct cognitive tasks that they were able to do was pretty comparable between the three groups. But when they drank alcohol that night and their REM sleep was disrupted, because these researchers showed with monitoring their sleep with electrodes on their brain, that their REM sleep was disturbed. At 1 week later, when they were given the same cognitive problem-solving associative skills, it was found that they were only 40% as good as the control group. And what is surprising is that REM sleep happens from one day to the next, and memories that you've had a few days earlier are still being processed by the brain, because these people got their alcohol 2 days after learning that task. And when tested 1 week later, their problem-solving ability was only a little above 50%. So what I'm trying to say is that alcohol not only causes high blood pressure, not only does it lead to low heart rate variability, increased risks of atrial fibrillation, poor cholesterol quality, but it'll also impact your higher cognitive thinking skills. The next important question that many people ask me, in fact, I am somebody with boots on the ground. I see patients on a regular basis, many patients during the week. And I've been talking to them about sleep recently, and many of them ask me, I would like to take a sleeping pill because I sleep poorly. And what I want to tell people is that taking a sleeping pill causes sedation, which is very different than natural sleep. So in other words, when you're sleeping, this is an electrical recording of the brain. It is high frequency, low amplitude, it's going very fast. On the other hand, when you are in a stage of deep sleep, there is electrical activity that is a very programmed electrical activity. It's not like you are in coma. The brain is still active. It is showing electrical activity that some sleep experts say indicates that you are transferring the memory from short-term to long-term, that you are creating an increase in growth hormone, that you are resetting your blood pressure. There may be a slide that will address all of this. The REM sleep is a sleep that is associated with improving the association between your memories and higher cognitive skills. On the other hand, sedation, like an anesthesiologist would give you, which would be general anesthesia, sedation is a milder form of that, that does not require somebody to monitor your breathing. The electrical activity is very different. It is not the restorative electrical activity that you get in natural sleep. So we should first recognize that sleep medicine causes sedation, but does not cause natural sleep. So these slides were a little bit out of sequence. I wanted to kind of reiterate the benefits of natural sleep. We have gone through many of these before. One of them is memory consolidation. We already talked about this, transferring memory from short-term to long-term. This is an important point, resetting the baroreceptor reflex. In our neck, is the carotid artery, and it has receptors that senses blood pressure. When the blood pressure goes up, the receptors tell the brain the blood pressure is too high, send signals to the heart and blood vessels to drop the blood pressure. In the course of a day, the baroreceptor reflex, just like a thermometer in your home, like, during the daytime, you increase the thermometer temperature because you've gone away from home, the set point goes higher. So the baroreceptor doesn't respond to higher blood pressures during daytime, but at nighttime, there is a resetting, a lowering of your baroreceptor reflex with good sleep. If you don't sleep well, there is no resetting of the baroreceptor reflex and your blood pressure remains high. We talked about this. There's a reduction in heart rate. There's a reduction in blood pressure. We talked about how REM, rapid eye movement, improves associative and problem-solving aspects of our memory. We touched a little bit about immune defense. We talked about cancer defense, which becomes better with sleep. In fact, the natural T cells, the natural T killer cells, with lack of sleep by 1 week, can be reduced by about 70%, increasing your risk of cancer. This has been nicely demonstrated by several researchers. I did not get a chance to show you that insulin sensitivity, in other words, you require a lower amount of insulin to keep your blood sugars lower. Insulin sensitivity improves with sleep. We showed you that leptin increases with sleep. We showed you that ghrelin, the hormone that creates hunger, when you don't sleep, it goes up and creates hunger. I did not get a chance to show you that growth hormone is released during deep sleep. And we touched a little bit about the prefrontal cortex. The activity of the prefrontal cortex is highly necessary for us to plan, for our willpower, to make the right decisions, to have a distraction so that we don't lead into temptations. The activity of the prefrontal cortex improves with sleeping. But are there real downsides of sleep medications that have been documented? This is the work of a scientist by the name of Daniel Kripke. He's done a lot of work in that. He took people and he said, I'm going to measure whether these people have a higher risk of mortality if they take sleeping medications. And he decided that he would compare group with none, with very few doses of sleeping pills during the year, between 18 and 132 and greater than 132. And the higher the doses of sleeping pills that you took, you had about almost a 5.5-fold increase in the risk of dying and about a 40% increase in the risk of getting cancers. Now, you may say that this is association, not causation. What that means is that people who don't sleep well will take sleeping pills, and people who don't sleep well are at higher risk of dying because of all the things that I told you about. However, when you look at this in a large group of patients, a person who is ingesting a sleeping pill should know this and should decide for themselves whether this is something that's going to make them not take a sleeping pill and look for other cures. This is another thing that Dr. Matthew Walker points out. There is a global experiment that is happening about once a year, which is called the daylight saving time. So daylight saving time happens in spring, and instead of it being 2 o'clock in the morning, it becomes 3 o'clock. So you have to wake up an hour earlier. That reduces your sleep. And that reduction in sleep time is associated with a 44% increase, according to Dr. Walker, in the risk of having a heart attack in the week during which daylight saving time occurs. So that's a much bigger global experiment that is going on through which people have been collecting data. There is a lot of fallacies in collecting data on that, but definitely it is worth considering that. Now, so far, we have talked about how sleep is important for us and how lack of sleep can cause diabetes, high blood pressure, atrial fibrillation, heart disease, cancers, reduce our immunity, and increase our risk of dying. But what are the pearls that we can give you to help improve your sleep? Now, the way I would describe it is that sleep is earned the old-fashioned way. You have to earn it with lifestyle. There are no quick and easy fixes. I have been working with many of these recommendations over the last 7 to 8 years, and I'll give you the best ones that I have. One of them is to entrain your circadian rhythm. So if you spend time in natural daylight during the day, like I am in the habit of going cycling on the weekends, and you can see my bike in the back. If I'm cycling on the weekend on a nice sunny day, I know that I'm going to sleep well that night because it entrains my circadian rhythm and it makes my melatonin peak at the right time in the night when light goes down. There is a significant association between daytime exercise and sleep, because daytime exercise, one of the factors that causes sleep is a buildup of a chemical in the brain, which is called adenosine. The adenosine levels rise during the day continuously, and exercise in some way contributes to improving your sleep. There is a time when you should not exercise, and we will go into that. Now, when you're about to fall asleep, there are several things that are happening in your brain. One of them is that your melatonin is going up according to the circadian rhythm that you have created, and your core body temperature is dropping. The drop in core body temperature is an indication to your body and your brain that sleep should occur, along with the higher levels of adenosine. So we'll talk about how core body temperature drops and what you could do to make that happen before you sleep. Many people talk about a sleep schedule. A sleep schedule means that if you're going to bed consistently at the same time and waking up consistently, that gives you a strong benefit in terms of having better sleep. Now, if you are in a shift work, in other words, you go between night and day, your circadian rhythm is disrupted, and shift workers have a higher risk of cancers, higher risks of heart disease, higher risks of mortality. And the World Health Organization has labeled shift work as an important risk factor for ill health. Now, all of us are guilty of LED lights. LED is light emitting diode, and they have blue light in it. The modern screens have a way to block the blue light to some degree because you can go to a nighttime mode. And many people say that the incandescent bulb, the one that is not LED, the lux that comes from it, that is the intensity of light, is much lower compared to the one that comes out from LED screens. So it's better to read a book at night rather than look at a screen. I am not able to do that. I am an electronic person for whatever reason. And so when it approaches 7 o'clock, I take my screen and I reduce the light to 0. And of course, it's already set to a dark mode at sunset. And I think that has worked very nicely for me, that I'm reducing the intensity. And I try not to watch media, but to read on Kindle through a color that does not give very bright light. So reducing your exposure after sunset, or at least a couple of hours before you sleep, is a very important measure of falling asleep. A dark bedroom, in other words, nightshades. It took me many years to convince my wife that a dark bedroom is a prerequisite for us to sleep better. A low bedroom temperature, because sleep requires our core body temperature to be low. And here comes in the core body temperature information. When you take a warm bath just before you sleep, you vasodilate your skin. You open up the blood vessels in your skin, you lose heat, so the temperature inside your body drops. And that gives your brain, it tricks your brain to saying that you are ready for sleep. I wish I had made more slides on caffeine. I'm a big caffeine proponent. I love coffee. It's been very hard for me to stop drinking coffee except for 1 cup in the morning, because coffee interrupts your non-REM sleep, not the dreaming sleep, but the sleep without the dreams. It lightens the sleep. Instead of you going into deep sleep, you go into lighter sleep. And that lighter sleep is not as restorative. And caffeine can definitely have an impact. Another aspect that I want to tell you about caffeine is that the half-life of caffeine is 6 hours. So if you had a cup of coffee at noon, at 6 p.m., you have 50% of that coffee still remaining. And at midnight, you have about 25% still remaining in your body. And that may not be conducive to good sleep. So if you're having caffeine, probably have it early in the morning before 10 o'clock and not afterwards. We talked about alcohol as not being good for us. I have seen this time and time again. If I go home late, like today, I'll be going home late and probably have dinner at about 8 o'clock. And that dinner will probably going to be large because I've been stressed in making this talk and talking to you guys. I have not had much food this all day today because I wanted to be ready for this presentation. And perhaps I'm going to eat a large meal. And if I do that, my resting heart rate is going to be high. It's not going to lower well. My heart rate variability is going to be lower. And that's going to create a pattern of sleep that is not as restorative. So consider reducing the amount of food that you eat in the evening and eat it a little earlier in the evening before you sleep. This is another important point. Don't exercise very late in the evening. And the reason is that when you exercise, you increase core body temperature. When the core body temperature goes up, you also increase the amount of adrenaline that is floating in your bloodstream, which is the fight or flight hormone. And so the signals that the body is looking for, a drop in your core body temperature, a reduction in your adrenaline level is not happening, and it may prevent you from sleeping. The sleep experts tell me that don't take a nap after 3 p.m. because it might disrupt your sleep. And this last thing I'm investigating with a little bit. And the last thing that is that if I wake up in the middle of the night, I used to think that if I just lay quiet and remained in bed indefinitely, even if I didn't fall asleep, I would eventually fall asleep. And I'm not sure that was a good strategy. The sleep experts recommend that if you are not able to sleep for 20 minutes, get up and do something that Megan Ramos tells her fasting patients. When you get a craving, find an activity that is meaningless, like go fold your clothes in low light, rearrange your drawer, go and read a book that you really don't want to read. And not that you're going to kind of get enticed by it. Like last night, I woke up and I couldn't fall asleep. And I picked up certain articles on sleep, and those were very interesting to me. that was the wrong thing to do, because the interest in that article awakened me and prevented me from falling asleep. So what I would like to tell you is that the improvement in sleep is going to be a process of harnessing all the skills that I have given you. And hopefully this will help. And I hope that I made a very convincing argument to you that it is not enough, if you want optimal health, to just focus on fasting, on nutrition, on exercise guided by recovery that I talked about last time, but to also incorporate the importance of sleep. And you can monitor sleep with the Whoop band. I am liking this device more and more. The iWatch is not as good. I'm also reviewing this device, which is called Fitbit Sense. And if there is enough interest in questions and answers, I'll have a session in which I'm comparing the Whoop band, the Aura ring, which is charging right now, so I don't have it on my ring, on my finger, the iWatch and the Fitbit Sense, in terms of both your recovery after exercise and how well it monitors sleep. So that's all I have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I hope it was useful. I'm trying not just to focus on fasting and cholesterol and low carb diet and nutrition. I want to focus on all 4 pillars of health: intermittent fasting, nutrition, exercise optimized by recovery, and sleep. So thank you. I'm going to end the session here, and I will keep in mind that I'm going to give a review of the devices. Thank you.